My name is Hannah Slavin. I'm with Exacom. I'm a marketing manager and customer advocate. And I'm joined today with Jameson Peavy House. He's the Director of Public Safety at Rapid SOS. Say hi, Jameson.
Hi, how are you doing?
We're
You
not
may,
seeing your video
yeah, you meant to
yet.
pass the control back over one more time for us to get the video to
Oh,
work.
yeah, sorry about that. Hang on.
You gotta love the modern day, Zoom meetings where you have to, figure out how to work everything. Yeah.
All right, so many buttons. We'll get there.
And video. Look at there.
There we
Thank you so much.
go. Hey, yeah, no worries. Sorry about that. Um, okay, so Jameson, I come from a very business background, and
Mhm.
coming into public safety has been very interesting. It has been very eye-opening for me coming in the last few years fresh. Um, but that's not your experience at all. Can you tell me a little bit about where you came from and what your experience is?
Sure. Pretty much my entire history has been public safety. And that's about 25, 26 years now, starting right after high school, being involved in local emergency services as a volunteer. Then went to EMT school in my 20s, early 20s. And then as I was finishing up EMT school, doing my ride-alongs, I came to this sudden realization that I did not like other people's body fluids. And so I figured that EMS is probably
I can
not the
imagine why.
role for me, right? I was like, maybe I should explore other options. And a job came open at the local 911 center, and it was a midnight telecommunicator position. And I thought that sounds kind of cool. I'll try that till I figure out what I'm going to do with my life. And then pretty quickly I was hooked. I believe my first shift by myself was a friend of mine who was involved in the domestic, and a weapon was discharged in that, striking the perpetrator and killing him. And that was, for me, it was like, wow, there is a possibility here for me to like really impact my local community. And then 20 something years later, I was still there. Um,
That's awesome.
I always tell folks that I was telecommunicator and a trainer and a supervisor, and ultimately I was demoted to director. Take me out of the seat, put me in the back room where I belonged. But in that experience, I had a lot of opportunities and some great leadership and mentors to kind of help me understand the full breadth of public safety and what it means for us, to be able to serve our community. I left the county that I worked in, lived in. Went to work for the state of Tennessee for 3 years as their statewide training coordinator, the first one that we had. We kicked off a virtual training environment just prior to COVID, and a lot of in-person courses averaging really well over 10,000 hours a year in content, and it was fantastic. And during COVID, as I was finishing up some work with the NINA board of directors, I began talking with Rapid SOS, and I always understood their mission. I appreciated what they were doing for public safety, and everywhere I went, people were talking about how Rapid SOS was changing public safety with location information. And I said, at some point, if things align, consider me. I'd be more than happy to talk to you. And we began what I call basically flirting back and forth. And then I was like, it's COVID. We're serving our community. I'm really, really tied up right now. I'm sure this COVID thing is only going to last 2 or 3 months. So maybe you can call me back then. That was 2020. And they sent me over an offer letter, and it was exactly what I was looking for. I wanted to lead a dynamic team to impact public safety in a positive manner. And what they offered was exactly that. And I said, you know what? I think this is where I want to go. Talk to the family. And I said, you know what? Give me 3 months to wind down this COVID thing, and it'll be out the door, and no problem. Well, 3 months came and went, and I made the transition anyway. And I had great leadership in Tennessee and loved that job. But man, what we're doing here at Rapid SOS today is just absolutely incredible. The speed and the mass that we have to be able to impact positive things for every telecommunicator across this country just is so fulfilling in this career.
Yeah, yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. I know that when Exacom talks to our customers, they can't say enough good things about Rapid SOS, about usability and the
Mhm.
power from the data that they're able to get. And we've experienced nothing but great things working with you through
It's
this
good.
partnership and developing this integration. So, on behalf of Exacom and your personal work through your career, thank you. We
Appreciate that.
thank Rapid SOS for the work that they're doing, and are working to make that as effective as possible down the line.
Agreed.
Um, yeah. So thank you. So let's kind of kick off the webinar. We are going to talk a little bit. Jameson and I, we've got some pieces we want to cover, share with you guys, and we'll go through that. We've got some. We'll do some Q&A at the end. If you have any questions, any comments, feel free to drop a message in the chat. There's also the Q&A section. You can drop your questions in there. We'll get to them at the end. But yeah, let's get started.
For sure.
Yeah. So, just talking about streamlining emergency management, there's so much that goes on. And you guys, telecommunicators and dispatchers, and there's a lot that you guys are juggling, right? A lot of information, a lot of demands, and a lot of different systems and tools. But, through all of that, there's a lot of data that gets passed down. And so, Jameson, what we're going to talk about today is that information and how, why it's important, how it's important, and how these guys can use that to streamline their processes, essentially, right?
Sure, absolutely. And, when we talk about data, people really get nervous, right? There's a lot of what I call FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt about this deluge of data that may be coming our way in the comm center. But I want to kind of level set just really quickly, because ever since the first 911 call, and matter of fact, today is the 54th anniversary, I believe, of the first 911 call, 53rd. Just ever since that first call, we've always had data. And when we say that, people are like, well, you had Annie Alley. No, we've always had data. And think about what data actually is. And I'm going to read the actual definition. It's defined as factual information used to inform a decision, right? And that's what we do as telecommunicators. We take information, we make a decision about how impactful does this response need to be for this caller, right? That data typically has been analog. Somebody on the scene has witnessed some traumatic event, or they've seen a person they love go unconscious, or whatever that call may be. All of those sensory inputs that caller is feeling, the eyes, what they're seeing, the ears, what they're hearing, the smells, just the adrenaline rush they're getting, they're taking all that information and they're trying to push it to you, a call taker, right, down some medium, typically a phone line, and trying to say, this is what's going on, this is what I'm seeing, this is what I'm feeling, and you're trying to process that. So you have all this data from the scene down a small medium, and the telecommunicator then has to say, okay, what's relevant? What's not? What information do I need to pull from this person to make a more informed decision, right? And then what do I do with that information? Once I process it in my brain, what do I do with it? I turn right around and I type it into a screen, right? I put it into CAD, call handling, etc. And then what happens? Either I or a dispatcher reads the information off the screen, right? The same information, right? Some subset of information from the scene to the telecommunicator now on the screen. And I turn right around and I key the mic up, and what do? I give it out in an analog format to the responder. We've always had that data. But today we're seeing things about additional data that's coming from the scene, from sensors, from vehicles, from telematics, from this device right here, whether it be applications or the device itself, from smartwatches, which is incredible. And what we're finding is the data we're receiving, that factual information, devoid of human emotion, the sympathetic nervous system, ramp up during a stressful situation, all of that, right? We're getting that factual information. And what happens? We're able to do a couple of things really quickly. One, we have shorter times to dispatch because we're not literally pulling teeth, right? We're not trying to get information from that person. Secondly is because it's a shorter time to dispatch and we have the data we need to make informed decisions, we're reducing stress on telecommunicators. And for us, that's, for my team, so impactful because of because the hiring crisis we have right now in public safety is incredible. And we see, it's not uncommon for us to go into comm centers and have 20-30% vacancy rates. And that's terrifying, right? Because the call volume just continually increases. There's a lot of other impacts too that we can probably discuss here too, Hannah, like what does a caller feel? Now that I have data and I'm talking with a caller, they understand the situation. The caller's like, you understand what I'm doing? I see it. Yeah, right. Yes. It is a 2017 Jeep Grand Cherokee, red in color. It is real over one time. It was running 45 miles an hour. How did you know that?
It's like because you're reading my mind.
Exactly. And that makes that call go so much better.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean that makes a lot of sense. And you're right, if we look at the old analog data, we have, a caller who's experiencing different pieces. They're seeing, they're smelling, they're, possibly tasting, they're hearing, all of those things coming into them, and then they have to process that, communicate that out. It goes through, this whole process. There's so much room for information to get jumbled or mixed up,
Right.
and having that information in a much more reliable way, can really, like you said, reduce that stress on the call takers, which, like you said, with understaffing is a big pain point right now.
It is, right. And so typically in our response to some kind of stressful stimuli, our body does certain things, right? Heart rate elevates,
Yeah.
lungs start moving more oxygen, blood moves to the extremities or to the core, pupils dilate. But what typically happens is we get this tunnel vision, right? And our callers are telling us about this incident through this very small aperture. And what we do with data is that we open that aperture up and we say, here's the entire scene. Here's the information we have about this scene. That caller doesn't have to look at each individual piece to give you the information you need to make a decision. That leads to a more informed response and what I call a wiser response, right? Because now I know, because of data, when that Jeep we talked about earlier left the highway at a high rate of speed, there were 4 occupants, 2 were restrained because the sensors in the vehicle told me so. And the caller just saw it go off the edge of the highway. That's incredible information. Now I can say, okay, that's probably going to be 2 units. Maybe because the speed of the impact, they were running 100 miles an hour. That's probably going to be a couple of helicopters. Now my scene has grown drastically, and I can make that decision at the moment of impact, not after the first officer gets on the scene and says, "Hey, I need more units."
Right, reevaluate. Yeah, just that right size response at the right time, like you
Exactly.
said, a wiser response and just better use of resources.
Yep,
Yeah,
agreed.
yeah, yeah. That's pretty cool. But talking about that tunnel vision, so the information that was coming in from the caller wasn't always accurate. And so it's, kind of our gut instinct is to say, well, data, I don't know, the information that's coming in from the phone system or coming in from, maybe their cell phone or whatever, let's just listen to what the call takers or what the caller is
Right.
saying. And so I would imagine it's tough going from this kind of mindset that's been prevalent with call takers for a long time of like, well, the caller says this, I'm going to go with what they said. So what does that, like, what does it take to kind of shift that?
That's a very good point. And what you're talking about right now is trust, right? And we talk about trusting data. The
Yeah.
reason we don't typically trust data 911 is because the data we've always had hasn't been hyper accurate. We may get, if it's phase 1, we're getting what side of town you're calling from, in a small community. If we're getting phase 2, okay, it's probably here, but there's like a 93% chance that they're outside this 300-meter circle and anywhere else in the rest of the world. So we're like, okay, so what we've done, we've trained over the last 15, 20 years with phase 2 particularly, listen to the caller, and the data itself, the caller should be validating what I'm seeing, right? The caller says, yes, I'm at Hardee's or McDonald's. The circle includes Hardee's or McDonald's. Okay, I can validate that. I know which Hardee's and McDonald's you're at.
Yep.
In this world today, really in the last couple of years, particularly in the last 18 months, the data has gotten so refined, and we're delivering the data before the phone rings, before the incident even is known to exist. We're delivering that data about that incident. That the callers now are the validation process for the data. It's flip flopped, right? Now we're trusting the data more because the data is far more accurate than that fallible human in a high stress environment who doesn't know how to speak emergency talk, right?
Right.
It happens, and that's incredible. That's a huge mind shift for us. It really is.
So, if we assume that and they're
Uh-oh.
able to validate that data, uh, so once they get that, I can imagine there's been a challenge because, like you said, they're, just typing it into their system. What does it look like? What are some of the problems after that?
Sure. So again, if I have the data, I want to be able to trust it first and foremost, a telecommunicator, right?
Yeah.
Secondly, is I need to know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Part of that process for us at Rapid SOS is really being how do we contextualize the data so that the telecommunicator sees it, understands it, can make informed decisions based upon that data much quicker. And so I'll give you an example. If I'm working in Tennessee, where I'm born and bred in Tennessee, so or if I'm working here in Tennessee and I run a Tennessee DL, I can tell you exactly by looking at that data, the name, weight, height, etc., restrictions, corrective lenses for me because I'm blind as a bat. How many entries? A few for me because I like the speed. Really quickly, I can rattle those off because I'm used to that flow of that data. But if I'm in Tennessee and you hand me an Iowa DL and I'm trying to parse that information out, I'm like, okay, where is the weight on this subject at? And I'm going to count how many entries because I'm not used to that level. That slows the process down. It is still much faster than talking one-on-one with a driver. What's your name? What's your address? How old are you? What's your date of birth? Do you have to wear glasses? How
And
many times
they're,
have right?
they're in the middle of something, so they're not
So
answering quickly.
exactly. So, and the same has happened in 911, right? We've moved from that world of having to just pull information from a caller, question by question by question by question by question, to a time frame to when data wasn't quite as trusted, kind of like having non-parsed information. And now what we're doing in Rapid SOS is presenting the information in a manner that we can consume very easily, very quickly, and make informed decisions. We're still validating everything with the caller and everything else that we're seeing, but that data lets us actually know what's going on. The cool thing about this, and we're seeing this across the country, most every mission statement you see in public safety, right, particularly 911 centers, we're going to dispatch closest available unit or the fastest possible problem to meet these standards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, when an emergency is known to exist. And we've always measured success in 911. The phone rings. We measure the time from the phone ringing to the time we answer. That's the first standard, needing call processing time. From the time that we answer the call to the time we dispatch, right, NFPA. And those are our measurements for success. But that requires a human interacting with that emergency. Somebody has to see it. Today, and for the last year or so, we've been giving you information about that incident before the human even interacts with it. A person riding a bicycle falls off, right, knocks themselves unconscious. Apple Watch detects the fall. Apple Watch tries to alert the person, no response. Apple Watch calls 911. We send the data from the Apple Watch to the comm center free of charge. You have exact location, information about that person, their health profile for Apple, and you know exactly what's going on. And you can send that response even though not a single person's passed by that person that's collapsed on the side of the track. That's incredible, right? So we've given you much more time now than before the phone ever rang. That's just a different mindset, and we had to be ready for that for the future.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely makes a big difference in that response time. But so talking about that information, getting to the telecommunicator, one of the issues has been the information isn't getting passed from system to system
Right.
other than typing that in. And Exacom sees this all the time with recording is one piece of information will come from here, another piece will come from here, another piece will be entered in here. And you have information, you have data in all of these disparate systems.
Yeah.
And it's really affecting efficiency. It's really, it's not a streamlined process because we were at one of our customer sites just a couple months ago. We were talking about Rapid SOS, and we asked them. We said, how are you getting this information recorded? And they said, well, we say it over the phone and we type it in here, and so you have all of these pieces that are still being entered in manually.
Right.
And I know Exacom has done a lot of pushing and a lot of moving in the industry to work on interoperability, and that is
Right.
near and dear to our hearts. And I know it is to you guys too, of making sure that your data, the data that comes from Rapid SOS, gets into the right places. So we've been pushing that for years, but a lot of times that just means vendors coming up with new features and new enhancements.
Right.
And a lot of times the whole thing isn't considered. And that's frustrating for us on this side of it, but I know it's also frustrating for the customer. It has to be
Yeah.
frustrating on, on the call taker side, on the telecommunicator side.
Well, having sat through multiple depositions and been in court cases, right? Those typically don't happen the next day. They happen months or maybe sometimes even years later. And the only record of truth you have is a CAD printout, maybe something from your call handling system, some audio recordings, right? And now you're trying to piece together an incident that occurred some X number of months before, that if it's gotten this far in the process, it's probably a very significant incident for your community. You're trying to sit there and say, this is the record we remember. We've handled a meeting call since then. This is what we have. And then you get on the stand, right? And the first thing, cross-examination. Well, why did you make that decision for? Well, I had data in front of me that told me that it was a multi-vehicle wreck, or there was, one car traveling high rate of speed, or I knew that there were multiple alarms going off at this building. How'd you know that? Well, the data told me so. Where's that data?
Where is it?
Prove it.
Exactly.
And you can't.
Show me.
Right. And so that is why RapidSOS developed free APIs for all these different vendors: CAD, call handling, recorders, mapping, right? All this stuff that you can take all the data, location, and additional information, plug it ubiquitous into the workflow, but also into the recording system, because you want to be that absolute source of truth for everything about that incident. And what it is, that data now that you've made decisions on, right, that has been best for your caller, because that's what we're there for, right? The moment of impact, making those best decisions for our callers. You have a source of truth that includes all the data that you use to make that decision to back you up. And that's incredible, because the data is not going to stop. I'm sorry to tell y'all, today, we're well over 400 million devices connected to RapidSOS.
Yeah.
That's only going to grow exponentially. And if you think it's going to stop, it's not. I'm sorry. We're here with data. We're doing everything in our humanity that's possible to make this as a light of a burden on concerns as possible. You talked about interoperability, and like I said, I've been around for a little bit. I was working during 9/11. I was emergency management director after that, and I realized that they're sending all this money out, right? Massive amounts of funding, et cetera, for interoperability, and we bought radios. Cool, because we thought we couldn't talk to each other, so we're going to buy radios.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like buying a TV station, but not broadcasting anything on there worth watching, right? So we get this idea that yes, the means or the medium is great. You have to have that in place. That's the radio system.
Yeah.
The interoperability piece is the data.
Yeah.
It's whether it's voice, written, or whether it's something I read off a screen, or something the caller told me, or maybe it's the recording of the caller live in that environment going to the responder.
Yep.
That's the data piece. And in this year, right now, we have ECCs who are sending out video links to their callers. Send me a video of that. Absolutely, here you go. And we're processing that video inside the comm centers. That's a little scary, right? It's a new world, but that's where we're at.
Yeah. I mean, we're making huge strides, right, with getting access to information through mobile. Like you said, it's really mind-blowing to see, where we were a year ago, where we are now, and looking at where we can be next year. So kind of framing this, as we're looking at streamlining information, right? There's all this data coming in, all of these silos. And so some of our takeaways might be, or some of our advice to comm centers would be looking at, what are your sources of data?
Mm-hmm.
Like what's coming in, what's coming in from the caller, what's coming in from sensors, what's coming in from RapidSOS data. And then looking at when all of that data comes in, where does it need to go? Like how does it get recorded? How does it get archived as part of that? How does it get sent to dispatch? How does it get out to the first responder? What does that whole process, that whole funnel look like? And then, looking at what information isn't getting recorded, because like you said, you go to trial and suddenly you have to, well, not suddenly, but it was coming, but you have to justify your actions.
Yeah.
And you have to justify, I made this decision based on this information. And if you don't have that information recorded along with the other pieces of truth, it's anybody's guess.
That's right.
And, maybe you're relying on an audio file or, something that was typed in, but you really want that recorded. And, Exicom records it. I'll put that out there. You mentioned
Sure.
those 3 APIs.
Hmm.
We are the only recorder that has worked with all 3 of those to capture all of that information that the call taker sees when they're in the middle of an incident. So all of that gets recorded with the audio. And for us, there have been other recorders who have gone part of the way, who capture just the basic location information. But for us, it was really important that we open that up to get all 3 of those pieces, because there are big decisions that are being made because of the data that's coming from you guys.
So on my monitor right here, I have 2 monitors, one in front of me and one above me, right? And I have a little post-it note right here, and it says, "Content without context is just noise." And when you think about the information we're recording today, and you put together those files for some lawyer or DA or whatever it is, and it's like you just stack it all up, right? It's like all the different radio channels, telephony, whatever you have recorded, right? And you give it to them like, I can't make heads or tails of this. Can you break it out? Because you're not a telecommunicator, for one. But secondly, having that content and putting it into context of what's going on in that situation, that's where clarity comes into play. And when you have a recording system that allows you to put all that in this beautiful, concise record of truth, it becomes a massive asset for you. It really does.
Yeah. There's a quote. Let me find it. I'm just throwing this in, but there was a quote about clarity, and the quote was that hindsight, which coincidentally enough is the name of our recorder, our product, it says hindsight brings clarity. It brings the fuzzy, in the moment details into focus, so we can see things as they actually were.
Yep.
And of course, having all of that information after the fact to look at that incident, to piece that together in a way that makes sense to present to somebody else is invaluable, right? I mean, you want to be able to justify your actions.
Right. And now you talked about the data's coming in, right? Whether we're ready for it or not, the data's available. And we have a responsibility. I'll just say we have a responsibility in public safety. If we were truly focused on doing what's best for our callers, to use everything in our power to make the better decisions, data helps us do that and reduces stress, right? And we have on the other end, we're talking about the ability to be able to recall this data. At some point afterwards, they say, this is exactly what occurred. This is how we got the information. Here's where it came from. The piece in the middle that we have to focus on, right? You talked about earlier, policies, procedures, training, protocols. And that's tough for us, right? Because we're trying to write new policies on data sources, and maybe we don't have a lot of experience with that. So RapidSOS hears that, right? And so we've been sourcing those policies and things from across the US, from company or from agencies, and making it available for others to mimic or to just blatantly copy, or to say, I like this, but it probably has a gap in there for my needs. Let me go in there and make some adjustments to that. And trying to help that ACC understand that we're there not just to deliver something to you, right? It's like, oh, here's your data, have a nice day. It's how do you actually utilize that data for the betterment of your callers? And very soon, how do you pass it to your responders in a live environment? Because again, that last piece, I typed it in, but then I read it and I gave on the radio. How do we say this information should automatically just flow to the responder? I may still tell them, but they're actually going to have it in the palm of their hand. Yeah. And that's a game changer.
Yeah. And what you talked about of having that information flow, there's a lot of different ways to do that, right? A lot of, different types of integrations and connections that we can set up, looking at, if you're looking at this whole flow of information and how it gets passed, you're looking at the whole system cohesively, because that's really where you're going to find opportunity. Of course, there's connections between your recorder and CAD and different data sources, to your call handling equipment, and just having that information move through. But like you said, defining those processes to make sure that where there's any gaps, where systems aren't passing one thing to another, to make sure that those get included.
We hear that
So
sometimes, right? We hear
yeah,
people say, "Yeah, I see the data in front of me, right? Like I know based upon the information from this person's cell phone, their personal cell phone,
yeah,
that they speak English, they are this age, they have this medical history, they're providing that to me at time of call. It's flowing through, and yet I'm still required to answer what's your name, what's your cell phone number, what, and like the information is like it's there in front of you, and we're still in this old mindset of okay, I know these answers. Can I
yep,
validate them very quickly? Right?
yep,
Are you? Yeah. Okay. And this is you're still yes. Okay. That shortens that time again, right? But that is
yep,
the intersect that we have today, right? The old world
yep,
with all this new amazing data that we have to make our job easier. And that's the intersect that we have to figure out, right? And that's
hmm,
there's not a perfect solution to that today. There probably never will
yeah,
be because it's constantly evolving. But again,
exactly.
if you have questions about that or concerns about that, right? We'd love to hear your concerns. Reach out to us at Rapid SOS. We're more than happy to walk that process with you.
Fantastic. Awesome. So we talked about some smaller pieces. So reevaluating processes,
Mm-hmm.
looking at existing integrations between platforms, really that low hanging fruit. One of the things that we would encourage emergency centers to do is look at, in looking at that whole process, it really starts with the relationship with vendors.
Yeah.
I know that most of what Exacom has done over the last 30 years has been in response to customer desire, right?
Yeah.
Of talking to our customers and finding out what those needs are and finding out where those pain points are and where they're seeing pressures. Whether that's like where to put a drop down or what system we need to integrate. And you can always find somebody to do what you want, and throw money at the situation, right? You can always
Sure.
find somebody to do recording. You can always find somebody to do CAD. It's like, okay, there's quite a few solutions out there. And you're going to be able to find it at a low price point if you're just looking for the function of it. But Exacom works really closely with our customers, and I know Rapid SOS does too, to build those those relationships, to
Right.
really solidify communications, to really listen and inquire to see what the needs are. And not every vendor is going to do that. Not every vendor is going to work with the customer. But finding a partner that will engage with communication centers, that will engage with what these problems are and getting our hands messy
Right.
essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think about that. We talk about the public safety team I have here. It's incredible, right? And I haven't updated because we just hired somebody else, but um, currently at 470 years of experience in the comm center, right? That's
Yeah.
that's not a paramedic. That's not a cop, right? That's somebody who's either sat in the chair or has been integral in the management of a comm center, working the policies and processes. That's a huge amount of resources and experience, right? But we know we don't know everything. And so we take that experience and that knowledge, and then we talk to our clients. We talk to our customers. We talk to the telecommunicators on the front line on midnight shift.
Mhm.
Tell me what your problem is. I can't look at this bright screen. You need a night mode. Check. Night
Done.
mode. There. Okay. Now
Yep.
what do you need? Right. And so
Thanks.
I know
Next.
that, right. I know that y'all are doing the exact same thing because
Yeah.
when you talk to the customer has a voice in this, and it's the loudest voice. Right.
Absolutely.
Right. And we have a voice in this, right, from B2B partners and data flows and how it looks and how the touch and the feel and that kind of crazy stuff.
Mhm.
But the customer's voice is what's driving that long-term relationship. Because you're
Yep.
right. If you don't have relationships in public safety, you don't have anything.
Great.
That trust is paramount in everything you do.
Yeah. And having, I know our most successful features and all of that is always has been a result of working closely with our customers.
Right.
And I know that once we deliver something that is impactful for one customer, it's impactful for all of them or
Yeah.
most of them. And there are ripple effects throughout the industry. So I know personally that that's been one cool thing that I've seen is just how my team can work together to come up with a solution that, like, sure, technically we kind of nerd out about because we're data nerds,
Right.
we're
Exactly. Yeah.
software nerds, we're,
I
we're all
got you.
excited. We're like, it does this cool thing.
Yeah.
And so we're like, hey, we did this cool thing, but then seeing it actually land on, in the emergency communication center,
Yeah.
and seeing the users use it, and not just use it to solve whatever problem that was, but to alleviate this pain point where they can actually get excited about it. That's humbling, because, like I said, I came from outside the industry, and the past 4 years working with people who um, have a rough job. And
I
that's,
agree. It's
that's
true.
not,
Yeah.
yes, it's a rough job. And I met a lady the other week who loves being a telecommunicator. And it blew my mind. I was like, I don't know how you do this for like a week, let alone she's been doing it for like 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's Jameson, it is so humbling to me, of just the service and the sacrifice. And it's been eye-opening, this whole process. And so to be a part of a company, and I know, you feel the same way now, being on the vendor side,
Yeah.
being a part of a company that can help make their job a little bit easier, and to empathize with
Yeah.
where they're at and what their challenges are, and to try and help make it better from, even this other side, has been a very cool experience for me.
Agreed. I think about that, and just that you give me a compassionate telecommunicator who's good at their job. There's not a job in this world they can't do.
Yeah.
Won't find one. And what typically happens is that when they leave the comm center and they go to work at something because maybe they want a higher paying job or need that for their family or need to move or whatever else, even the folks who we worked in our comm center to get them through like RN school, right? There were 6 RNs graduated from our small agency. Every one of them came back and said, if it wasn't for the pay, I'd rather be sitting in the console. And you look at that commitment to community, but also that commitment to compassion for your fellow human. Man, that's incredible, right? And so you have these folks on the front lines doing this day in, day out, middle of COVID. They don't get to stay home from work, right? They don't remote work. They go in the comm center. What an amazing responsibility that you and I have, Hannah, as vendor partners, to make sure we get it right for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're going to work our butts off to make sure
that's right. Dang right.
So the last thing I want to touch on before we wrap up is, I know Exacom has seen this happening, especially the last couple of years, and I wanted to share it just as an idea for the folks on the webinar today, of really just encouraging them that they have the power to drive the industry. As vendor partners, we come into this saying relationships are important. You need to find a vendor who's willing to work with you. But on the flip side of that, they really have the weight. Money talks, and as they seek out solutions, as they seek out vendors, the more that they're able to look cohesively at all of these processes and systems and data and all of this, the more they're going to get out of those relationships, and the more they're going to be able to streamline those communications and those responses. And one of the biggest pieces we've seen, especially lately, is when they go out to RFP, there's quite a bit of weight that they get to throw around as far as who's integrating with who. If they have a recording vendor they like, they can go out to RFP and say, somebody needs to integrate with them, or, vice versa, or, so-and-so needs to do such and such with so-and-so. And that has been how a lot of our features have come about. And it's that kind of thing that really pushes the industry and really deepens those integrations across platforms.
Agreed.
And it's kind of go in with your wish list and see what you can get out of it, basically.
And I would even push a little bit further, right? So the RFP process is always arduous, right? It's a time suck. It really is. It can be, right? And what I typically see people do is they write an RFP for what they want today. and they don't think about, I'm still using the same platform 5 years from now, right? I'm still depreciating it, still paying for it,
Yep,
service model, whatever it may be. Your RFP should be written for, what do I need 5 years from today? And
exactly.
you think about that, and you think about data's not going away. So we're seeing a monumental amount of RFPs come through that require connections to Rapid SOS, right?
Yep.
We need the additional data, the ADR, I3 compliant list, et cetera. I need that information to flow through this system or through this platform or whatever it is. So it's available to all my telecommunicators. That's a very smart thing to do, right? And you can do
Mhm.
that from a standards-based product. You can do it from calling out a clearinghouse, whatever it may be. But what you've done is that you set yourself up for success after success after success after success because you've thought beyond the horizon of where you are today.
Absolutely.
It's super easy for us to attend a conference, see a whiz bang demo. Oh, that's awesome! I love this thing. I want this, right?
It's got
And
the
then
lights and the
right, and then
flashing,
and then
and
go into a
it's
mindset of,
cool.
I got to write an RFP for this, right? And I'm like,
Yeah,
I'm in the back of my mind, I'm writing this because I want that whiz bang thing. That's cool. That may be a capability you absolutely need.
right.
But what else in that? Again, open that aperture up and think about from the entirety of emergency response that I'm going to have to handle for the next 5 years.
Yep.
What am I going to do to shorten times of dispatch? What am I going to do and invest in to reduce stress on my telecommunicator? And what am I going to do to protect myself in liability?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And we talk about it, particularly when it comes down to recorder software and SaaS or whatever the model you choose for that. That's incredibly important because that does become that record of truth, right?
Yep.
And you're the records custodian by law. That is a big piece of what we're talking about here. And so you're right, the RFP process is not something we handle lightly. That's why many folks now are going to third-party entities to help write those RFPs
Yep.
because maybe I don't know everything I need to know,
Sure.
but I know what I need and I know what I think I might need in 5 years. And that's where I should be focused on my RFP. That's something I saw last week at a conference.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know some of our customers will come to us for help on writing that because
Sure.
there's aspects that we might understand that the customer might not be an expert in, and that's okay.
Yep.
But it's like, okay, you don't have to know everything. That I personally don't have to know everything. I just need to know who to ask and who to go talk to.
Yes.
And
And Hannah,
Exacomm's,
yeah, Hannah,
yeah,
that comes because your customers trust you,
yes,
right? People come
yep,
to Rapid SOS and ask questions about that. What does this mean, SIP header? What does that mean? Let me connect you to guy on my team, right? He
yep,
can walk you that as long as you need to. We'll talk as deep as you want to talk about I3 conformance.
yep,
Why? Because there's a trust there that yes, we want to continue being your partner, et cetera, but you trust me today because you trust me in the past and I've proven that. And that's why they come to Exacom. That's why I talk to them about, hey, what when I start doing this recording, what's this RS-232 thing? I thought that went out a long time ago. Do I still need that? Right. So I mean, like that
right.
process is
I've got
very,
a guy for
very,
you.
yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
If you've got a
yeah,
guy for RS-232, I'm pretty impressed. I'm just going to tell you.
I'm sure I do. I'm sure I do. Or maybe my guy has a guy.
Yeah.
So we'll figure it out.
And
We'll
if you're
figure
on
it
this
out.
webinar and you're looking for a job for RS-233, here we go. Hannah's your person.
Yeah, right. Oh, Um, okay, so we talked about a lot, right? There's a
Right.
there's a lot here, talking about all the information, talking about all the different ways to integrate that and streamline that. Was there anything else that was on your heart to share today, to talk about?
I appreciate the opportunity. I really do. Right. You can tell I'm fairly passionate about data, right?
No.
Because I've seen it work. Um, but more importantly, I've experienced when I wish it had been present.
Mhm.
And if you've ever heard me speak about telematics, it was one of the largest reasons I walked away from being in the comm center. Um, we had a pretty tragic incident about a week before Christmas where I worked, and no clue how long this person and his two nieces were lay on the side of the road. No clue.
Oh,
6, 8, 10 minutes. Traumatic head injuries for both children. We lost one of them on the scene, and traumatic for everybody involved. I stepped out the back of that ambulance, on that scene, knowing that I had to quit. I had to find something else. And For me, and now when I look at telematics and I talk to our telematics providers or our data providers or alarm providers, whatever it may be,
Yeah.
in the back of my head, it's a 3-year-old talking to me and a 3-year-old coding and a 3-year-old getting on a helicopter, right? And like, if I had known this vehicle impacted this guardrail at this speed at this exact instant, and those folks didn't lay there for 6, 8, 10, 12 minutes before somebody else came along and found them and called 911.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm still in the comm center today.
Yeah.
Maybe they're still with us. Maybe we're able to affect a better outcome for that family.
Yeah.
That's why I get passionate about it, because I know every call we take is data driven, all of them. The question is, do you want to keep trying to pull information from a caller when there is concise, truthful data that you can use to make an informed decision while you're still caring for that caller? And that's changed public safety. And if you're going to use that data and you know it's there and you're going to use that data, you want it ubiquitous and you want it recorded. There's no other truth. And for me, that's it. That's it.
Well, Jameson, thank you so much for your time today.
Sure. Anytime.
Just your passion, your heart is contagious, and it's been a great experience talking through this with you. I'm going to throw up.
Please not on screen.
I know, right? I was like, wait.
Gotta throw some humor here at the very end, right? Wow, this was really great. I'm going to throw up now.
Start hyperventilating. No,
right.
But yeah, so I do have a slide I'm going to put up with our email addresses, so your email's on there, my email's on there.
Beautiful.
Thank you guys for joining us on the webinar today. We hope that it was helpful. We hope it was inspiring. We hope you feel encouraged to go through some of the nitty-gritty stuff, RFPs, and looking at processes, but we also hope that you feel appreciated because we definitely do appreciate you and all of your work, and whatever Exacom and Rapid SOS can do to make your jobs easier, please reach out. We want to hear from you. Let me get that information up there. I'm also going to throw up a couple questions. I'll put up a couple questions, poll questions, and if you haven't already, sticker questions in the QA. Give me just a second. We'll transition to looking at those.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ryan. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have questions about, hey, we know what is Rapid SOS? I don't think you would have that question because we're in 5,000 comm centers. But if you are, right, and you want to know more, go deeper, or whatever else, please do reach out. We're more than happy to spend time with you and explain the entire process of data and why it's important, and give you a list of all the data pieces that we can provide you. It's pretty exhaustive. It'll take a little bit of time to walk through it, but again, we give you that precise control to say, what do you want to use? What do you not want to use? What have you trained on? Provide you the training, et cetera. So I'm more than happy to do that for y'all.
Yep. And on the Exacom side, we are a logging recorder vendor. Like I said, we are the only recorder that captures all data from Rapid SOS. There are a lot of recorders out there that have integrated with you guys, Jameson, but we did the full thing. We weren't going to cut corners on that. And so if being able to be that source of truth, we're excited to be able to offer that.
We have one question from Thomas.
Yeah.
Has the integration been field tested?
Yes, that's a good question. Let's see, Mark, are you on? I've got my product manager, Mark Woody, who can speak a little bit more about that.
And good afternoon. So the answer to that question is yes, we are currently working through a couple of beta pieces. It is generally available, but we are moving it out as customers are interested and run through their processes. So, while we did not cover the specifics of the integration here, for anyone that wishes to have details about what that looks like and how it works in their existing system or in a new system, you can certainly reach out and we will be more than happy to roll through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always love having a webinar with a question. That's like, actually somebody listened. That was awesome. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other questions? Okay, all right. Well, like I said, a recording of this will be available. Oh, you know what? I didn't pull up my poll question like I said I was going to. Let me
We
see
were
if I
waiting
can-
patiently.
I know. Okay, got what is your biggest concern concerning additional data within your communication center? So it's the question that's up right now. You could go ahead and answer that, and I will
Oh, I
share
can't
the
vote.
results. Shucks.
I'm going to guess that the biggest concern is probably liability. That's going to be my guess. We hear that quite a bit, and it's an important conversation. And the liability of having the data, not using it, or the liability of using the data and using it inappropriately. Those are two big questions, and it's a big conversation, right? I would couch it the same way I couch, hey, if you have phase 2 data and you don't use it, what's the liability there as well? And so don't look at additional data any differently than you would look at any other thing coming from the caller, because it is the same type of information you're sourcing from that human. You're just being provided to in a much quicker, concise manner from some sensor on the scene that's geolocated to that incident. So
All right, we'll go ahead and end this and share out the results.
drum roll. Oh, look at me being wrong. It's twice today.
Only
Increase.
twice? That's pretty good.
Yeah, increased staff, stress on staff, right? We hear that. If you're concerned about that, reach out to me. I can, believe it or not, I can show you a video of telecommunicators using data, and they're smiling on camera. They're like, oh, now we get it, right? It's not the fear and uncertainty we thought it was, right? It actually does streamline my process and makes it so much easier for me to dispatch my calls. If you'd like access to that, please holler at me offline. I can share that with you individually. It's pretty impressive to see the impacts we're making.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Okay.
So there was a comment from Ryan in the chat, and I would give my response to that is, if it's cohesive where they can use the data, then it's less stressful. But if they're actually getting all that data in 10 different spots and having to look at it, that's where the additional stress comes, because it's taking up their time and energy and preventing them from actually using the data until they've collected it from all those spots, which is why the process all the way through for customers to actually think it through and tie those pieces together through the RFPs or through existing integrations with vendors is what helps reduce that.
Yeah, and Erica has a really good point here as well, right? The right training, right? And so for every one of our data partners in the training portal, we provide that free of charge. You're able to go in there, watch training, not just about the product, but about the process. And that's really important. The product is very intuitive. The process of using that data is really important for the telecommunications to understand, like, oh, this is data. I understand where it's coming from. So now I understand that it's trusted data and I can use that. So training issue, absolutely.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Okay, I've got one last poll question, and then we'll go ahead and close up. So this will be an interesting one. Be honest, you're not going to hurt our feelings one way or the other.
Might hurt mine.
Okay. Do you feel more empowered to streamline the response process, or maybe more encouraged?
So in the context of like using additional data in that process is what you're saying?
Mhm.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
The answer is A.
Just another minute. We got about 25 responses so far.
Yeah, got that right. Yeah, when the system, when the data stuff goes down, it's incredibly stressful.
Yeah. Okay. And the poll, share results. So
I'll take
pretty
that.
good,
I'll take that. Yeah.
you know.
For those of you
north
somewhat, let me know. I'll be more than happy
Yeah.
to connect with you. State conference, national conference, call you, come by your ECC, let us know. We'll be there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Hannah. This has been really, really great.
Yeah.
Much better than I anticipated because I mean it's something I'm get really excited about, and sometimes I run a rabbit with it. But I think that understanding the entire workflow, did a great job leading that. So I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, like I said, this has been a fantastic process, and thank you so much, Jameson, for your time.
no worries.
Rapid SOS, thanks, for your participation, for being such a great partner as Exacom tries to, make this all better for public safety and reduce some of those pain points. But yeah, thank you for all of your guys' time today. Mark, thanks for jumping in on the Exacom side, and yeah, we'll let you guys go.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.